All right, what is up, guys? This is Ryan from ElevateCyber with another edition of This Week in Security. At the time of this recording is February 20th, 2021. Let's get straight into it. The first article, malformed URL prefix phishing attack spikes 6,000%. Now, I wanted to highlight this one because this is really one of the oldest phishing tricks in the book, really. Apparently, it's regaining popularity, but here, essentially, it's just malformed URL prefixes, right? So in this case, URL prefixes, think of like HTTP : / or HTTPS : / Instead, they're throwing in a backslash in there, just hoping that you don't catch it. It's really quick. Now, some of these social engineering attacks that you see, especially by your more advanced threat actors, whether it be nation-state actors, stuff like that, are going to be extremely, like they won't even have little grammatical errors and stuff like that. But there's still plenty of these lower level phishing attacks that will have stuff like this, like Amazon.com instead of Amazon, trying to hope that, this, I guess they kind of term this typo squatting, right? But you'll see this tactic used in a lot of social engineering around there, especially like the lower level ones where they're just throwing it at a lot of people and to see who falls for it kind of thing. But definitely very pertinent for anyone out there. Everyone uses the internet in 2021, so it's important to know that these things are out there, and so that you can make sure that you don't fall victim to these kinds of attacks. So basically what would happen is there will be some kind of typo in the website, something like this, and it'll send you to a different site. Like it'll send you to their website instead of the site you think you're going to, and they will use CSS and stuff to make the page look like the page you think you're going to. Like in this case here, this little example, they make it look like Microsoft, right? But in reality, it's their site. So you put in your Microsoft Office credentials, and you're actually sending it to the attacker, and now they can log into your Office 365 account or whatever the case may be. So that's how that works. Just make sure that you really pay close attention when you follow a link from an email. So that's all to be said there. This next one here is, let me scroll up a bit. Mysterious silver Sparrow malware found nesting on 30,000 Macs. So there's recently, Apple has released a new chip called the M1 chip. And essentially, there's been quite a bit of malware. This is the second strain that is targeting Macs that are using that M1 chip. And this is one thing you'll notice sometimes with malware and stuff. In this case, this malware is out there. It's already infected a lot of Mac computers, obviously. But what's going on is, and it says it somewhere in this article when I was reading it earlier, but essentially it's infected all these systems, but it hasn't actually executed yet. Final payload yet to be determined. So you'll see this sometimes. It appears to just be waiting for further instructions, which is worrying because it's clear that the authors are advanced and sophisticated adversaries, researchers said. This is something you'll see sometimes, and it is pretty scary. Like some of these strains of malware, they'll infect tons and tons of computers. And, basically they're controlled, by a command and control server, but you might sometimes see that they're just sitting there idle, waiting on commands from the command and control server. And no one knows what those commands are going to be and when they're going to happen. So that seems to be the case here. Really interesting, right? The attackers have control of all these systems, but they're not doing anything just yet. So no one really knows where they're going to go with it. And here was a bit of information that is really interesting. It really speaks to, obviously malware and stuff, it's bad, right? It's a bad thing. It's created by criminals. But you got to admire the sense of creativity that goes into hacking, right? And all you offensive guys, you probably know what I'm talking about. Like, there's just so much creativity. Yeah, there's the logical side of security, right? Of, just being very logical and with your hacker methodology and stuff like that. But so much of being a hacker involves just being very creative and thinking outside the box and doing things. You know, it's kind of a cat and mouse game between offense and defense. And you really got to, while it's bad, it's a negative piece of information, you have to appreciate some of the creativity at play here. That's all I'm saying. Because basically, Silver Sparrow, which is the name of the malware, by the way, the infrastructure is actually hosted on Amazon Web Services S3 cloud platform. And also they're using Akamai's content delivery network. Now, if you know anything about the IT world, you know that Amazon Web Services, particularly the S3 bucket's extremely popular, and so is Akamai, like for WAFs and content delivery and stuff like that, right? So what does this mean? Well, because they're using these platforms, instead of some other platforms that they could easily just blacklist, well, they can't blacklist this stuff, right? Because 99% chance they're also using Amazon Web Services or they're using Akamai, right? These are extremely popular technologies. So now organizations cannot afford to block access to these resources, right? And so that makes it even more difficult for these guys to secure against this malware. Now, this is another thing that was interesting about this. This is actually JavaScript-based malware, which is not something that we've seen too much. In the article, it definitely says in the Mac environment, we haven't seen this like hardly at all. And just very interesting, right? It's using the JavaScript API to execute commands. And they said this is the first instance they noticed of that. And so just very interesting, right? These hackers, they continue to push the boundaries and to really think outside the box and think creatively. Certainly, if you're going for your OSCP, this is the kind of mindset you need. You need the mindset of an attacker, that creativity, the curious and creative attacker that will always think outside of the box and think of different ways to do things, right? And so with this article here is there's a card brand MixUp attack that was found by cybersecurity researchers. And so basically when you see stuff like this, basically a research team has found this. So, I mean, there might have been a 0-day with this out there, but it wasn't found by any kind of breach happening or anything like that. This was found by the white hat guys, the cybersecurity researchers, right? And so basically this attack lets the attacker bypass MasterCard PIN and use them as an actual Visa card. So basically you can get around having to put in the PIN, which is a pretty significant thing, obviously. Here's a short little clip of it. Take a look. So essentially putting in the payment information, and then he gets prompted for the PIN. And then he can use like the other card here, the MasterCard. And then it doesn't even have to put in the PIN, and it just charges the transaction gets approved. So some interesting stuff there. Not going to get into like the fine details of how that is going on, but this is one of those things that you see security researchers doing things all the time, finding stuff, and then the things get patched. So just a little interesting bit of information there. Now this one, obviously the SolarWinds thing was huge, but they're constantly learning new things that these attackers have done with the SolarWinds attack, because this was a very large-scale, sophisticated attack, and there's really a lot going on here. Now, another thing that came out was that the SolarWinds hackers actually stole some source code from Microsoft Azure, Exchange, and Intune. So if you know anything about Microsoft, you know that all of their software is closed source. They don't have any open source stuff, right? So if I know anything about software, the IT world, right, oftentimes things that are closed source are, more vulnerable than open source, because with open source, you have the entire internet that could look at bugs, right? Anyone on the internet can pull the code from GitHub or from wherever it's hosted, and they can identify security bugs, right? When you have like super closed source stuff, it's only being audited by the internal Microsoft team. They're the only ones that have access to the source code and stuff like that. So one thing that just comes to mind for me from an attacker's perspective is, okay, if they have access to the source code of especially popular applications that so many companies are using. So many companies use Microsoft Azure and Exchange and Intune, right? You have access to these source codes. You can run audits on them. You can stand them up. You can pen test them, right? You can identify security bugs in there because now you have access to the code. So you can identify some bugs that might be a lot more difficult otherwise to identify. And you can actually sell that information on the black market. Not saying that's what the SolarWinds hackers are going to do. Maybe they're a more advanced persistent threat actor or whatever, nation state actor. You could sell them. They could sell them to other countries, right? They could sell it to North Korea or even just on the black market to run-of-the-mill attackers. They could do a lot of things with this stuff. So, but digging into the article a little further, it doesn't look like it was like the whole, like all of the code base. It was just a small subset of these. So before you go panicking too much, if you use any of these applications, right? It was just a small subset of Azure components and Intune and Exchange components, right? And so, but yeah, you could now have more 0 days out there on the black market or whatever, potentially. But no one really knows. That's the thing. No one really knows what it's going to be. Now, one of the byproducts of this whole SolarWinds thing has been, and this is what the next article is going to really dive into, but since it was here, I wanted to highlight it. It's really incited this push towards embracing the zero trust mindset, which I think is a really good idea. As someone that's been in this field for a while, I see zero trust as being like a pretty good next evolution in the IT world, really. So in this article here, goes further in depth. As I said, most businesses plan to move away from VPNs and adopt a zero trust access model. Right now, if you're working for a company, chances are, you're working from home in 2021, the world being what it is, and chances are your company's using a VPN. Now, the problem with the internal networks of almost every company, certainly every company that I've ever worked for from a security perspective, one of the issues are when you're on the internal network, you're really trusted. You're a very trusted, you're just very trusted on the network. All the external stuff, like their websites, the things that are internet facing, are a lot more restrictive. If you want to get into like admin access or anything like that, you got to provide username, password, credentials, But once you get on that internal network, a lot of times you are just assumed to be trusted because, you should, you're part of the company. Like, yeah, we trust you or whatever, right? Not only is this kind of dangerous because, internal threats, insider threats are very much a threat, right? That's actually one of the most damaging attacks are the ones that come from the inside. But, when you look at this different malware and, as it becomes more and more advanced, a lot of times these guys are able to get on your internal network. And when they do, it's a cakewalk for them to pivot in your internal network because think about it, they're breaching you on the external where your security posture is more hardened. When you go on the inside and everything is like, less secure because there's less people looking at it, maybe you have a bug bounty program. The bug bounty hunters are testing the external stuff. Obviously, they don't have access to your internal network. So that's kind of all on you, all on your security team or whoever you're outsourcing to secure your internal. And with the zero trust model, it's really kind of just assuming that, basically demanding that you provide credentials to do anything on the network. Don't just trust you because, hey, you're on the network and therefore you must be like an employee or someone that should be on the network, right? Now it's kind of like taking that assumption out of the equation, forcing credentials to be used at all times. And, let's just look at zero trust security model, right? You can get a little bit more information, probably explain it in a more eloquent way, right? Zero trust, a network security model based on strict identity verification process. Dictates that only authenticated and authorized users and devices can access applications and data. So right now, it's pretty much the way most companies work is you sign into their VPN, and once you're on their VPN, then you are, by all intents and purposes, trusted. You don't have to do any additional identification, verification process, anything like that. You're good to go and use the network as if you are just assumed to be trusted, right? I think, yeah, implementing this model is definitely going to make it a lot more difficult for attackers to pivot. And I mean, it'll still be possible for them to pivot because there's always a way in security, but it will slow them down and I think could really mitigate a lot of the damage that you see going on with some of these attacks out there. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and go ahead and check out some of the other videos on This Week in Security. If you missed last week, or if you just want to learn more about security, check out some of my other videos that you'll see linked right over here. So I will see you guys over in that video, and definitely be sure to hit the like button to help get the message out there. Later.